is a canvas of wonder. Let curiosity be your guide to explore.
Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We are jumping straight into the sources today because we're looking at a stack of historical notes, biographical excerpts, and scientific records about someone you are, well, undoubtedly already familiar with.
Right. I mean, everyone knows the name Marie Curie.
Exactly. You already know the headlines. You know she discovered radium. You know she's the only person in history to win Nobel Prizes in two different scientific fields, which is, physics and chemistry.
It's incredible.
It is. But our mission today isn't to just rehash that basic biography you learned in middle school. We want to look at the unvarnished reality in these sources, the absolute logistical nightmares, the grueling physical realities, and the paradigm-shifting science she actually had to navigate.
Yeah, the actual day-to-day reality was far from glamorous.
So to set the scene, the notes take us to Paris, 1891. I want you to just picture this. It is late at night in this extremely drafty attic. A young woman sits huddled in a threadbare coat, and her fingers are literally trembling.
Not from nerves.
Right, not from nerves. From a bone-deep cold that the tiny, useless stove in her room can't even begin to fight off. And for dinner, she is eating a literal crust of bread.
Just a crust of bread.
Yeah. But despite those brutal conditions, she is smiling because she has finally made it to the Sorbonne, and she is about to change the world. Okay, let's unpack this. We are talking about Marie Curie, a woman who basically turned the impossible into her daily routine.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't just a story about scientific discovery. It is really a story about redefining the boundaries of human endurance and, challenging our assumptions about what success actually looks like.
Because today, we picture scientific prestige as like these pristine, climate-controlled, multi-billion-dollar labs.
Exactly. Massive teams of specialized researchers in hazmat suits. We certainly don't picture a freezing student surviving on bread crusts.
Right.
But that extreme physical discomfort and her complete willingness to endure literally whatever it took to access knowledge is the defining thread we see consistently woven through all of these sources. It wasn't just a temporary phase.
It was her entire methodology. And that contrast between the polished legacy we know today and the grimy reality of her life, it only gets more extreme as we move into her professional career.
Oh, absolutely.
So she meets her soulmate and fellow scientist, Pierre Curie. They embark on this groundbreaking research. And you would assume, given their brilliance, they'd secure a respectable university laboratory.
You would think so.
But they didn't. They ended up in an old, abandoned wooden shed. And the sources emphasize that this wasn't just some cute, rustic workspace. It had a glass roof that poured water directly onto their tables whenever it rained.
Yeah, and the history of that specific building adds this incredibly grim layer to the story. It had previously been used by the medical school as a dissecting room. Right, so it was entirely unsuited for delicate precision chemistry. It was essentially a wooden shack, zero temperature control. The notes detail how it was absolutely freezing in the winter and stiflingly hot in the summer.
There's actually a quote in the sources from a prominent visiting chemist. He came to observe their work and was so appalled by the setup that he described their lab as a cross between a stable and a potato cellar.
A potato cellar.
A potato cellar. But, the physical environment was just the backdrop. The actual day-to-day labor was brutal. For 4 solid years, Marie basically functioned as a heavy manual laborer.
We really need to look at the chemistry of what she was attempting here to understand that. The material they were working with was pitchblende. It's an incredibly dense, complex mineral ore.
Just thick, heavy rock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They suspected it contained a new element, but the concentration was infinitesimally small. To extract it, she had to use a process called fractional crystallization.
Which sounds delicate, but it wasn't.
Not at all. It's not mixing a few test tubes. It involves boiling massive quantities of this heavy ore in strong acids, letting it crystallize, dissolving it again, and repeating the process thousands upon thousands of times.
The scale of that is just hard to wrap your head around. I want you to visualize this. The sources describe her standing over these giant steaming cauldrons, churning thick, boiling sludge.
In a potato cellar?
In a potato cellar. And she wasn't using standard laboratory equipment. She was stirring these vats for hours at a time using a massive iron rod that was nearly as tall and as big as she was.
It completely dismantles the artificial wall we often put up between intellectual labor and physical labor.
Yeah.
While other respected physicists of the era were attending symposiums and debating theory in tailored suits, Marie Curie's hands were permanently stained and scarred from chemical burns.
And the sheer statistical improbability of what she was doing is staggering. She wasn't panning for gold. She was looking for a ghost. She was processing tons of dirt to extract a tiny gram of a new element.
Moving an entire mountain by hand to find one invisible grain of sand.
Exactly. But then, that backbreaking labor pays off. The sources describe the magical moment of discovery. One night, Marie and Pierre walk back into that drafty, dark shed.
No lights on.
No lights. And they look at the glass jars sitting on the wooden tables, and they see this soft, eerie, blue-green light emanating from the sludge she had refined. She had found radium.
You really have to put yourself in the mindset of a 19th century physicist to understand the weight of that. That glow wasn't just a pretty color. It was a massive crisis for the known laws of physics.
Right, because classical mechanics said the atom was solid, indivisible.
Like a billiard ball. And the first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So if a jar of dirt is sitting on a table in a cold room, generating its own heat and light out of nowhere,
it is breaking the fundamental rules of reality.
Precisely. The cognitive dissonance must have been overwhelming. That glow proved the atom was decaying, shooting off pieces of itself. She was looking at the birth of nuclear physics, glowing in a jar.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because she was dealing with a completely unknown property of nature, she was totally enchanted by it. She treated this highly dangerous element like a precious treasure.
Oh, the details on this are terrifying in hindsight.
They really are. She would literally carry test tubes of radioactive isotopes around in her pockets. She kept them in her desk drawer.
Just right next to her pens and paper.
Yeah. She even kept a little vial of radium by her bedside when she slept because she loved the way it lit up the room like, quote, faint fairy lights.
It is a harrowing detail for us today. We know exactly what those invisible alpha, beta, and gamma rays do to human tissue. But radiation biology simply didn't exist then.
She had no idea.
None. She didn't know those faint lights were systematically tearing through her cells and damaging her DNA. She just saw the beauty in the science.
And that purity of intention, I think, brings us to what might be the most philosophically fascinating decision of her life. She successfully isolates radium. It is an earth-shattering breakthrough.
With massive industrial and medical applications.
Right. And when the time comes to capitalize on it, she explicitly refuses to patent her discovery.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the philosophical implications of that choice are enormous, especially when viewed through our modern capitalist framework.
She could have been a billionaire.
She deliberately walked away from an unimaginable global monopoly. But she fundamentally believed that scientific knowledge belonged to the world. To her, hoarding the mechanics of the universe for personal profit was a violation of the scientific ethos.
She passed up a massive fortune, specifically so that other doctors and researchers could freely use her work to develop early radiation treatments for cancer.
She handed the world a new weapon against disease, completely open source.
Which is entirely consistent with the student we saw freezing in the attic. Financial security was never her motivator. And that relentless focus perfectly bridges her laboratory work with the next massive challenge in the sources.
The outbreak of World War I.
Exactly. I want you to think about this. By 1914, she is a global icon, a double Nobel Prize winner. The world fully expects its most famous intellectual to stay safely hidden in a lab during a global conflict.
But she does the exact opposite. She went straight to the front lines.
She analyzed the war with the same practical logic she applied to chemistry.
Right. She looked at the casualty rates and recognized a critical failure in field medicine. Military surgeons were essentially operating in the dark.
In triage tents near the trenches?
Yes, unable to accurately locate bullets, embedded shrapnel, or broken bones inside wounded soldiers. She knew X-rays could save lives.
But X-ray machines in 1914 were massive, delicate, and stationary. You couldn't just order one to a muddy trench in Flanders, so she had to invent the entire concept of mobile battlefield radiology from scratch.
The true genius was in the logistical execution.
The sources detail how she went around Paris, petitioning wealthy citizens to donate their personal vehicles, mostly Renault. She gathered a fleet and stripped them down.
And outfitted them with X-ray machines.
But the brilliant part is how she powered them. She designed a system where a dynamo was hooked directly to the car's engine. So the same motor that drove the car through the mud generated the electrical current for the X-ray tube.
Stunning improvised engineering. And these mobile units quickly became nicknamed the Little Curies.
I love that.
But outfitting the vehicles was only half the battle. The French military didn't have mobile radiology technicians sitting around.
So what does she do? She doesn't just delegate. This double Nobel laureate teaches herself how to drive a heavy truck. She learns basic auto mechanics so she can fix a blown tire in the field.
And then she personally drives these vehicles to the front lines, navigating destroyed roads, fighting through deep mud, often under the threat of artillery fire.
She even brought her teenage daughter, Irene, along to help.
Who would later win a Nobel Prize herself, by the way.
Incredible family. Together, they set up these machines in triage tents, trained battlefield medics, and personally x-rayed the wounded. The tangible impact is staggering.
The sources credit these little curies with treating over 1 million men during the war. Over 1 million soldiers had a better chance of surviving because she refused to stay in a comfortable lab.
It proves that a laboratory wasn't the only place she could lead. But the sources eventually pull us back from the battlefield and force us to confront the tragic conclusion of her story.
The universe operates with a cruel sense of irony.
It really does. On July 4th, 1934, Marie Curie passed away. The very element she tamed eventually claimed her life. The cause of death was the decades of intense radiation exposure she endured.
She literally gave her life to the work. Every hour spent stirring those cauldrons, every test tube carried in her pocket, was incrementally dismantling her cellular structure.
So what does this all mean? The final takeaway from these historical notes isn't just about her death. It is about the physical reality of what she left behind. Her biological life ended in 1934, but her material footprint is still intensely active today.
The details regarding her archives will absolutely blow your mind.
Over a century after she worked in that leaky shed, her personal belongings are still highly radioactive. The sources note that her laboratory notebooks, her furniture, her original research papers—
Even her personal cookbooks.
Yes, even her cookbooks. They absorb the radiation she carried on her hands.
Because the half-life of radium-226 is 1,600 years. This means the objects she touched will remain radioactive for millennia.
Today, these items are housed at the National Library of France in Paris, but you can't just walk in and request to view them.
No, they're kept in heavy lead-lined boxes. If you want to examine her original handwriting today, you are required to wear specialized protective clothing.
And sign a legal liability waiver acknowledging the danger. It is a profound physical manifestation of her legacy. Her tomb rests in the Pantheon in Paris.
Recognizing her monumental contributions.
But the true enduring monument isn't the marble architecture. It is the literal, measurable energy still radiating from the pages she wrote on. Those notebooks literally glow in the dark with the exact same energy she discovered in that potato cellar.
Serving as a literal, eternal flame for a woman who sacrificed everything for human knowledge.
When you synthesize all of this, Marie Curie's life is a masterclass in perseverance. From eating crusts of bread in a freezing attic, to stirring boiling pitchblende in a cellar, to dodging mortar shells on the front lines.
She consistently chose action and humanity over comfort and wealth.
So I want you to think about Marie the next time you feel overwhelmed by a task. Her story invites you to question what you consider impossible in your own life and whether your own difficult sludge might be hiding something brilliant.
And that leads perfectly into a final provocative thought we want to leave you with today.
Go ahead.
The sources noted that Marie Curie explicitly refused to patent radium. She gave away a fortune so her work could be freely used to cure cancer. So consider this. If a lone scientist today made a completely new, world-altering discovery that could save millions of lives, would our modern systems of commerce and science even allow them to just give it away for free to the world?
That is a massive question to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep looking for your own glowing discoveries in